Hey, I'm Coach T, and this is week 48 in my C Sharp Dev Diary, where I've been documenting my progress learning C Sharp for about a year now and Unity for like 4 or 5 months. The big message for this week, it's going to be a short Dev Diary, but the big message is not all progress is linear. So I don't want to show the code in this case, but what ended up happening was I kind of hit a wall on what I was able to do with the systems that I was building in the game project. There are things I have to learn that I just didn't even know about, which it's not a surprise at this point. It can be frustrating at first to realize that you just kind of hit the limit of what you can do with that approach. But after talking to friends who are also learning to code, after talking to my wife, after spending a little while thinking about it, I've decided to back up, go into learning mode because I spent a couple of weeks there, a couple of months in build mode, build, practice those foundations, build as much as I could, and I just kind of hit a limit on how I know how to handle particular situations. So, that last project, it taught me a lot of really interesting things. I learned more about the trait pattern. I learned a lot about the command pattern. I learned about structs. I learned more about delegates. I can build a state machine on my own. I can build a state machine that controls other state machines, a super state machine, all on my own. I can use the UI to hook up things now to display appropriately. I learned more about update and fixed update and the lifecycle methods in Unity. And more importantly, I got to write a couple thousand more lines of C Sharp. So I've gotten very, very comfortable with those low, intermediate level foundations. And I am also really starting to grasp and understand how to use generics and delegates and the subscription pattern and the strategy pattern and all of that stuff that I've been working for months on um, is getting much more comfortable to the point where it feels kind of fluent. When I need to build a problem, I can break it down and I can start to wire up a solution. In this case, my solution was not a good fit for the long-term project, but it was a great prototyping in Pathfinder because the big thing that I learned is over the course of developing that RTS project from start to finish in my case means that you could basically engage in combat. I realized that I needed to have a more efficient means of communicating commands or orders or parsing information from one module to another in a way that was loosely coupled to avoid all of these tangled dependencies. So I had a pretty balanced but moderate to tightly coupled chain of couplings between the command module and the action state machine. Those could communicate back and forth, so they had to know about each other. Even though it was event driven, they were listening to each other's events. And then the action state machine was firing events from the move state machine, and it didn't know anything about the rest of the system. It just knew how to move, which is where I kind of ran into my breakdown. But as I was using structs to pass information from the command machine down to the action state machine, and then firing another event that passed that information along to the move state machine, I started to realize maybe I should just have like one central module that acts as I don't know, a route, or not even a route, but like a bus. And when I had articulated that to myself, I wonder if I should be using a bus, knowing a little bit about how a bus works in information systems. It was like all of a sudden the sky kind of opened up, and I was like, that would be a loosely coupled means of allowing or passing messages back and forth through the bus, sharing values. And I realized like I had already done all that work on the state machine to reconfigure it once, and I didn't want to do it again. So I went to my resources and I opened up my RTS course through gamedev.tv. Not a sponsor, by the way. They're just, I like them. And wouldn't you know it, like 10 or 15 lessons in, there's a whole side tour about using the bus pattern to do exactly what I was thinking maybe I should be doing. And it's another case of that weird convergent thinking that I want to say it's in my design pattern book by the O'Reilly corporate or the O'Reilly company, but it might have been in Uncle Bob's clean code book, that when you find yourself solving the same problem over and over again, a likely solution is going to be a design pattern, something like that. So in this case, the problem that I was trying to solve is a common problem, and I derived a fairly common solution that required a lot of context to even get to. And that context is evidence of the learning that I've gone through over the past year. So it was discouraging that I couldn't go through further with that project without significantly dismantling and rewiring it. But it was encouraging that the learning that I have acquired through long hours of practice and reading and study and writing, that it did converge on a common pattern. And now it's up to me to study that pattern and learn how to utilize it, because I have a feeling that this is going to be one of those really important ones if I want to get into doing web apps for education, stuff like that, which is ultimately my goal. I know I've been very distracted with Unity because I'm enjoying the types of puzzles that it presents, but this felt like a big thing because he gets Chris, I can't remember his last name, but in the RTS course gets into delegates pretty quickly, and that was kind of where I left off in the C# player's guide, is on the delegates chapter, because at the time I just didn't have a use for them. Now I do. So I'm anticipating that over the next 2 weeks I'm going to be learning a lot about delegates and how to pass information through a bus system and how to make this robust, extensible, flexible, generic bus system work to communicate all sorts of information, and that should give me a lot more context into hopefully networking, things like that. So not a lot of, this is week 49, not a lot of new content that I've been working through. I've mostly been learning and studying again, but the message is progress is not always linear, and as you're working this week, I hope you keep that in mind and you're gentle on yourself. Don't beat yourself up if a project doesn't work. Back up and figure out what you need to do to make it work. That might be a blank slate, but that's okay because it's a new opportunity to learn. All right, with that said, I'm out of here. I'm going to go get to work, and I will see you next weekend.